12 News is your local election headquarters. Now we continue our Where They Stand series on WPRI.com. I'm Raymond Bakari. Joining us today is Woonsocket City Council President John Ward, who is one of the 3 Woonsocket mayoral candidates this year. Mr. Ward, it's good to have you on.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
And the first question, in 60 seconds or less, why do you want to be mayor?
Why do I want to be mayor? Well, frankly, in 60 seconds or less, I have lived all of my life in Woonsocket. I have raised 2 children there who have attended Woonsocket schools that have been very successful. I have worked for nearly or more than the last 30 years in government capacity in one fashion or another, as a housing authority employee, a school department employee, and also the finance director for the town of Lincoln for the last 16 and a half years. Served 10 years on the Woonsocket School Committee and have been a member of the City Council on and off since 2005. I've got lots of experience, and I've always said to people when they ask, when are you going to run for mayor, I'd say after I retire. I retired from the town of Lincoln last July, and I have been feeling better since I have had to have a valve operation. My recovery has been very good, and I'm ready and energized again. And so I am now prepared to commit to that promise that I said I would run for the mayor of Woonsocket. I think my experience suits the job very, very well, and I'm prepared to deal with the challenges that Woonsocket is facing.
And I want to talk about the new budget for a moment. It saw a property tax increase due to the previous administration overcharging commercial taxpayers for years. Moving forward, as mayor, how will you go about getting that tax rate lowered while also fixing that issue of less revenue coming in?
Well, in fact, the less revenue did come in by something just less than 1%, but at the same time it required a 4% tax rate increase across the board for commercial, residential, and tangible. And that was a problem caused by the overvaluations and the appeals that have been going on almost since 2018, and those are getting settled finally. Some through the courts and some through agreed upon settlements, but we've had to abate close to $10 million since this process started, and we still have some major issues still to be resolved. It'll cost another few $1,000,000. And we have a statistical revaluation coming up in December. I have worked in the administration in Lincoln through 5 revaluation processes, and my expectation is that we'll take the revaluation data, analyze it properly, make sure that the balance of how it impacts the various components of the tax base and the taxpayers is done fairly and properly, and that the values are still logical and can be substantiated with a good factual analysis. We have a good tax assessor. Mr. Pagliarini has been there now for a little while, a little over a year, and he's done a very good job in analyzing his challenges and giving us solutions, and I would expect that he would continue to do that with me, and I sort of look forward to doing it with him and the finance director to get through that revaluation process successfully and do the best we can for the taxpayers.
I recently read in the Valley Breeze, one of the local papers that covers what's going on in Woonsocket politics, that Police Chief Thomas Oates III had pointed out that the department needs more staffing and that there's this officer shortage. In your opinion, what needs to be done to get more officers hired?
Well, one of the problems Woonsocket has always had is that our contracts tend to pay people less than other communities because of our lack of a good solid tax base as other communities have, and in general our community wealth, our average median household income is lower than most communities. I think we're second only to Central Falls. And so it becomes a challenge to raise enough money in taxes to compete for police department staff and for firefighters and for municipal staff for that matter. And I think part of the solution is we did just complete a police contract negotiation. I'm chuckling because it led to the removal of Mayor Lisa Baldelli Hunt in October of '22. And but they have what I think is a fair contract under the circumstances, with some good compensation. But the challenges in society brought on by issues nationally have made it difficult to recruit, and not being able to recruit a lot of candidates and only having so many slots available at the academy means you're playing catch up all the time while you're also competing now that there's a lot of lateral movement among communities for police officers. So I think part of the solution is this. We need to find and take advantage of every grant opportunity to fund our police department's infrastructure needs for equipment, for facility, for things of that nature, as much as we can from outside sources, grants, JAG grants, other things that are available to us so that we can use more of our operating funds to support the personnel and make it more attractive for people to come work in Woonsocket.
There's a statistic I want to get your thoughts on / what you would do as mayor to address. So the Department of Health recently released data showing overdose deaths in Rhode Island went down by 7.3% last year. However, Woonsocket had the highest rate of fatal overdoses, which that stat was 67.4 deaths per 100,000 people. So just a bit of a two-parter. What's your reaction to that stat, and how would you help lower that number?
Well, obviously the reaction to that stat is that it's tragic that it happens, and it happens in Woonsocket. Woonsocket is a community that has a very intensive and concentrated social service agency presence, and so it tends to be that people who need services come to Woonsocket, but we also have a large homeless population that manages to find itself in places that are not always easily accessible. And so when you have an overdose situation and someone is camping out in the middle of the woods or is under a bridge or things of that nature, it becomes difficult to access them or even get notification timely to provide service and help them through it and help them survive. And so there's two fronts that this has to be faced on, is dealing with the homeless population, finding some kind of affordable housing alternatives for them, and then on the other side of it is with the youth and deal with it as we are now with our opioid relief money. All of it, most of it anyway, is being dedicated to an education program in the school system to try to improve communication with youth so that they don't end up making mistakes, as too often many do, in acquiring pills and tablets, thinking that it's something innocent, but in fact it may be laced with fentanyl in a high enough dosage that it kills them. And that's the real tragedy, is when they're doing something they have no idea what they're doing.
So your primary is in September, but I want to look ahead to the general election for a moment.
Sure.
Because voters in the city will also be voting on various proposed changes to the charter. One question that stood out to me is an update to the process of filling a mayoral vacancy, which is relevant because the last mayor, Lisa Baldelli Hunt, resigned, which makes this question probably the most relevant out of them on the ballot. And for those watching who may not know about the question, it makes a special election time frame align with current state law in the event of a vacancy. If the vacancy is within 270 days of an election, then the council president becomes mayor, or the council vice president if the council president declines to ascend to the role of mayor. So where do you stand on that proposed change?
I fully support it. I actually drafted the first go-around for that charter change because it seemed difficult to necessarily expect that any council president who is supposed to be managing the meetings really and just presiding over the meetings is necessarily prepared to step out of their job and become the mayor for a period of time that could be as much as almost 2 years. And not everybody is willing to just walk away from their job. So the two factors that became important was, first, if it's an extended period of time, we should hold a special election, and it would avoid having to deal with the special election we had for a council person when the council president moved up. And the second is to create an option so that the council president isn't forced to take the job, but rather can opt out, and the vice president can, and allow for alternatives. Now, in both cases, I can say I would hope what we've just been through for the last 2 years never happens, and the removal process is never the case. However, there are always situations where health may be a factor, and other factors may contribute to a mayor having to step aside. But I think it's a little too much to ask a council president in every case to be the person that's required to take the job. Even the current mayor, when he took the job as council president, taking the mayor's job, was actually working his regular job half the day and mayor half the day. That's not how the city should be represented either. And I think it's important that we change this charter so that that can be more effectively done.
That's all the questions I had. Mr. Ward, I want to thank you for giving us some time for this.
Okay.
And thank you for tuning into this edition of Where They Stand. Remember, 12 News is your local election headquarters. We have more candidate interviews and a voter guide on our website, WPRI.com. For now, Raymond Bakari, 12 News.